Okay, so today I'm with Damon from We Are British Jews. It's actually a show that we both played a role in. Played a role, that sounds like acting. We took part in. And you've hopefully seen episode 1, but what we'd like to talk to you today about is a scene in episode 2 where Damon actually seems to storm out of a conversation with a Palestinian activist called Isa. And it's maybe one of the few scenes where we both feel that there was some of the context lacking from the actual show that was aired or from what took part. And so, Damon, why don't you talk us through the scene, what happened?
Yeah, I think I've put the whole thing in context and to give people a bigger picture. It is something that I asked the production company to change, to expand upon, to show more of the context of what led to me walking out. And I think it's really important that people know that, which is why I'm talking to you about it today. We were in a remote part of Hebron, up in the hills, in an activist's house, and we're sitting in kind of a semicircle in his garden, overlooking Hebron, and he's sitting in the middle of the people who are on the show, and he's talking to us more than a question and answer session. The other side of the semicircle, there's obviously the BBC crew standing there filming, sound recordists, production people. And the other side of the semicircle, obviously behind the cameras. And behind them at the house, there are a number of Isa's family, friends, standing there watching. It was probably the only time in the whole process that I felt uncomfortable. I didn't really feel safe. We had a security person with us. If it would have kicked off, I'm not sure.
Did we?
Yeah, there was somebody on the bus with us that was security.
Was that Palestinian security?
He was BBC security.
So he must have been Palestinian, because one of the things with the West Bank is divided into 3 areas A, B and C, and Israelis aren't allowed in the Palestinian control area. And so one of the things that actually really made me nervous was when we approached the place where this is taking part. This is we're visibly Jewish. Actually, I'm wearing a baseball cap because it was so dangerous for us to go there that they didn't want me to wear a kippah because they felt it could put everybody's lives in danger. And so as we're approaching there's a guy with an Alsatian on a huge chain, shaven head with floppy bits at the top. Looked pretty intimidating. Turns out actually he'd been arrested previously we won't go into the story because it's not actually aired as part of the show. But this is a very, very intimidating situation for Jewish people to enter. And we wanted to be there. We wanted to engage with Palestinians and understand their narrative, but it was intimidating.
Yeah. So what probably also comes across in the show is that I'm not the most thoughtful person. I speak from the heart. I'm quite emotional. And so I obviously I was doing a lot of tongue biting. And the worst of it came to the point where I would have bitten through my tongue when Isa said that when the time came, he would expel all Jews from Hebron, from the West Bank, and those that stayed would be arrested and tried for war crimes. In my head, what I wanted to ask, or what I wanted to say was, 20% of Israel is made up of Muslims. Why can't 20% of Hebron be made up of Jews? But I just didn't feel safe in doing that. And if it was just me, maybe. But part of the security thing was me thinking not just about myself, the other cast members, the BBC crew, and if it would have kicked off, who knows what might have happened. I'm not saying it would have done, but that's just how I felt. And after he'd said that, and I sat there thinking about it, and I can feel the words and the anger coming through me. And I thought, I can't put everybody in that position. And I think at probably exactly the same time, Ella said, I can't take this anymore. And I said, I'm not listening to this. And felt I had to remove myself from the situation, basically for the safety of everybody. And what it comes across as is me, a Zionist, not wanting to talk and listen to the other side. The reality was, I was scared.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of context missing. And it was a scary situation, but despite it being an intimidating situation, we were all conversing. And to Isa's credit, he said he would support Israel within the pre-67 borders, which is largely understood by most to mean that the West Bank and Gaza would form a Palestinian state, and Israel would be the pre-67, what was left on the like in between those two areas. However, there were in the show there were accusations of apartheid. There were accusations of war criminals. There were very strong language used, and you don't get the full context of the debate that took place there. So when he describes Israel as apartheid, that was challenged because obviously we don't believe that Israel is an apartheid state. As you mentioned, 20%, almost 20% of the population are Arabs. They have complete equality with Jews. There's a judge, Salim Gibran, who's an Arab, who sent a Jewish prime minister and a Jewish president to jail. That doesn't sound like an apartheid. As we're driving through the apartheid, what people will call the apartheid side of it, which is the West Bank, they'll say there's apartheid roads. We're driving along these roads and seeing Palestinian Jaguars on the so-called apartheid roads. This apartheid that people speak about doesn't exist, and that's missing from the final BBC edit. Similarly, the once you've stormed out, I don't know if you probably aren't even aware of what happened
after. I'd be interested to find out.
So when Damon left, my biggest interest, my biggest objective is to make peace between Israelis, Palestinians, Jews, Muslims. We've fought each other for too long, and there's so many good people on both sides of the political divide. And so here I am, I'm coming up against, I would describe as quite a hard, very passionate Palestinian activist who's living in it, who's been personally affected. He's lost family members to the conflict, and he's not budging. And he's saying that any Jew that lives in the West Bank, or any Israeli that remains in the West Bank, will be tried as a war criminal. Now, for me, that's absurd. The idea that in the 21st century, the moral position is to take 500,000 Jews and expel them from an area because they're Jewish, that's not a moral solution. The moral solution to me is those Jews that want to remain in the West Bank become Palestinian citizens in a future Palestinian state, just like those Arabs that wish to remain in Israel became Israeli citizens. And on both sides, you can have complete equality irrespective of the religion or the ethnic group that you belong to. Now, Isa obviously disagreed with that. And we went backwards and forwards, and it finally culminated with me shaking his hand. But what you missed in the lead up to that conversation was, I will shake your hand if you can agree to the idea that if 500,000 Jews don't leave of their own accord, they're not going to be driven out by the bayonet. They're not going to be tried as war criminals because these are ordinary families, just like the Palestinians are ordinary families. They're not monsters, they're not terrorists, they're not radicals, just like the Palestinians aren't. And any peace solution shouldn't revolve around the idea that 500,000 people should be forced to flee a country. We've been kicked out of too many countries too many times. I can't sign up. And I genuinely can't remember how the conversation ended, whether Isa agreed to that or didn't agree to that.
And the other thing, it probably comes across as saying, Isa saying this is an apartheid state, and Joseph saying, okay, thank you very much, then. Which obviously wasn't the case. And I also think it's from somebody it was their first journey to the West Bank, but also to Israel. But to see Hebron being totally different to my picture of Hebron in my head before I went there. So, and then when I thought about it, the actual part of Hebron that I thought the whole of Hebron was going to be a war zone. The only part that looks like a war zone is the 3% of Hebron that's actually the Jewish part of Hebron. Yeah. The rest of it is a thriving, bustling, modern city, roughly the same size as Plymouth, I think 270,000 people. Great retail, restaurants, as you said about the cars, Jags, BMWs, Mercedes, lovely homes. You can see villas out on the hills, apartment blocks, city centre apartment blocks that could be picked up and moved into Regent's Park. It was a thriving city. And the part that looked like a war zone was the 3% of it that's left that's the Jewish area. And I got really upset when we looked at the map and it's 97% Judenfrei. And that really got me,
For those that don't speak German, that means free of Jews.
Yeah. And that kind of added to the emotion of later on going to speak to Isa. And that's something that's still stuck with me, 97% Jew-free. Here's where you can live, and this 3%. It's a ghetto.
Yeah.
It's a 3% ghetto. So it's away from that, it's important to get the context of the walkout, which is why we started this. And it was through fear as much as anything else.
The saddest thing about Hebron is when you go there. For us, it's the Cave of the Patriarchs. For the Muslims, it's the Abraham or the Ibrahimi Mosque. Is when you go there, it's divided into Jews pray on one side, they've got a synagogue. The Muslims pray on another side, they've got a mosque. You can look through the window and see a Muslim praying, and bulletproof glass separates you. How tragic a time we're living in, where Jews and Muslims share one of the holiest sites on the planet and are separated with bulletproof glass out of fear that either side could fall victim to terrorism from the other side. I mean, that there's nothing more ugly and brutal than dividing a site like that with bulletproof glass. And so that was one of the harder things for me to experience. I mean, I've experienced it before. I've snuck into the Muslim side before, and I've been in the Jewish side many times. But it's a horrible reminder of the conflict. If you haven't watched it already, it's on iPlayer on the BBC. If you're living in a foreign country, get in touch with us. We'll give you an illegal copy. But yeah, watch it. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Go easy, because we're getting crucified by the anti-Semites. So we could do with a little moral support from the Jews and the Zionists. But yeah, we look forward to your comments.